Our story begins in a library where someone named Shinichiro Nihama is being asked if he's familiar with light novels. A young lady waits for his reply as Shinichiro confirms that he has read a few. The young woman is delighted to hear that and approaches him, asking for his help to find a popular novel she had lost track of. She only recalls that it was about a woman traveling across the country on her bike, and this was more than enough for Shinichiro to begin searching in the library. Shinichiro hands the novel to the girl, and she is astonished that he could find it right away. She is overjoyed that he was able to help her, showing Shinichiro a smile that captured his entire heart in an instant. Suddenly, a businessman wakes up, gazing at the pile of documents he still has to complete. He is in an empty office, wondering if everything he saw was just a dream. He is the same boy from earlier. After graduating from high school, he only suffered under terrible bosses and endless unpaid hours. He's Shinichiro Nihama, our protagonist, who without realizing was already 30. And in all those years, he never found the courage to quit his exhausting job. Now he's alone in his office, tormented for being a coward and not being able to remember a single joyful memory from his miserable life. However, he looks at his phone and recalls that there was actually something. His eyes fall upon Haruka Shijoin in her graduation picture. She was his dream girl in high school and his inspiration. For Shinichiro, the brief words they shared were the most treasured moments of his life. However, now she's nothing more than a haunting memory after the incident that claimed her life. Shinichiro grows desperate beneath the mountains of pending documents. He feels like he has accomplished nothing in his life despite being 30, and blames himself for worrying his single mother and driving her to an early grave. He slams his desk, asking why all of that happened and what he did wrong. If he had known how precious his time at high school was, he would have done everything to achieve his dreams. He yells at the sky, begging for someone to take him back to those days. In that instant, something snaps in his body. A sharp pain strikes his chest and he collapses on his desk. He looks at his phone one last time to see Haruka before fainting, remembering how important she was to him. Everything turns black and he wakes up covered by a blanket. He sits up, wondering what just happened. Shinichiro thinks for a moment that he's in a hospital, but upon seeing his old manga and video games, that idea fades. He can't believe he has returned to his old bedroom. Searching for answers, he leaves his bed and looks at the mirror. He is frozen in shock upon seeing he has also returned to his younger self. His appearance is that of a high school student, and he decides to check his phone to be sure. Upon looking at the date, he realizes he has returned 14 years into the past. Shinichiro tries to make sense of it, thinking that the only explanation is time travel. And in that moment, someone asks from outside his door if everything is okay. His mother enters his room, slightly surprised to see him awake so early. Shinichiro stays still, realizing that his mom is alive. Tears begin falling from his eyes as he sees her again after so many years. He throws himself at her feet, crying even louder as his mother tries to ask him why he's acting so strangely all of a sudden. Shinichiro only manages to say that he had a nightmare where she was dead, and she comforts her son, gently patting his head. After a while, Shinichiro heads to school wearing his old uniform, thinking that a 30-year-old man returning to classes must be a joke. However, he realizes that now that he's in the past, he will relive his life again and can use this as his second chance to shape his future. Now he knows what he must do. He must work to improve himself, strive to obtain everything he ever wanted, and fix all the things that went wrong. First, he wants his mom not to worry anymore and promises he definitely won't get involved with exploitative companies. Shinichiro feels like there was still something else he needed to do, and in that instant, a familiar voice calls out to him. A smiling Haruka approaches him like an angel, the girl that even after all those years he could never forget. He is aware that they never had a happy ending, but now, a new story is unfolding before his eyes. Shinichiro looks surprised upon seeing her again. Haruka seems confused by his expression, but he excuses himself by saying that he's just sleepy, making her laugh. This reminds Shinichiro that she's as graceful as ever, which is expected from the daughter of a wealthy family. Shinichiro also recalls her treating everyone with kindness and all the boys being in love with her. When Haruka graduated college, she joined a company and impressed everyone with her beauty and efficiency. However, this also brought envy from her female colleagues, leading to relentless bullying that gradually damaged her mental state. Time passed, and when she was 25, her body was discovered in her apartment, where she had apparently taken her own life. Shinichiro read the tragic news while at work, devastating him even more in his already miserable life. But now that he has returned to the past, he vows to save her and change the future. Shinichiro decides to continue their conversation, mentioning that Haruka looks full of energy. With a smile, she reveals that she spent all night reading light novels and had to use all her willpower to get out of bed. Upon seeing the novel she was reading, Shinichiro tells her that volume is one of the best, and Haruka is glad to see that someone else understands her, though something lingers on her mind for a while. Haruka mentions that she feels Shinichiro seems somewhat different from usual. He's usually quiet and not very talkative, making Shinichiro recall his old self. When he was younger, he lacked social skills, but at work he was forced to develop them in order to deal with clients. Shinichiro tries to say that the change was thanks to Haruka, which takes her aback. He continues, saying that he's simply trying to match the energy Haruka always shows when talking to him. Haruka can't help but feel embarrassed by his words, revealing how innocent she truly was. After that, Shinichiro notices her carrying a bag and asks her to allow him to help take those books to the library. She says it's fine, but he insists and grabs it without realizing that his old work habits had slipped out again. For a moment, he gets nervous, thinking that she might be grossed out by him, but he's surprised when Haruka thanks him, explaining that the books she was carrying were actually heavy. Haruka doesn't stop her compliments and mentions that Shinichiro feels manly today, something she finds charming. Shinichiro can't help but blush, having completely forgotten Haruka's ability to casually drop lines that could shatter a guy's composure. They keep walking together inside the school, drawing everyone's attention, but Shinichiro doesn't care. He only wants to enjoy the conversation with the girl in front of him. They finally part ways, and Haruka is already expecting to meet him after school. Shinichiro remembers that they used to spend time in the library. After all, it was the one thing they had in common. He enters his classroom and feels relieved by the view. Upon sitting at his desk and opening his books, he feels like he just opened a time capsule. Suddenly, a girl stands up and walks to the front of the class. She is Kazumihara Mitsuki, and she starts asking for suggestions for the school festival. Shinichiro realizes that he's in the year of the school festival, but he doesn't remember anything about it. Lunchtime finally arrives and Shinichiro already feels exhausted from all the subjects he has to relearn, until somebody calls out to him. That person is Ginji, who used to be his only friend in high school. Ginji immediately starts asking what he was doing walking next to Haruka as if they were a couple, but Shinichiro doesn't flinch, saying that he only helped her carry her bag. Ginji's jaw drops to the floor, shocked to see Shinichiro acting like the hero of a shoujo manga all of a sudden. Ginji also feels that his friend seems completely different, as if he just returned from an epic journey in another world. Shinichiro plays along, saying that he returned yesterday from a world where he was a slave for 12 years, but inwardly, he was referring to his old reality. Ginji gets serious, warning him not to forget that people like them at the bottom of the social ladder shouldn't bother the most popular girl in school. But for Shinichiro, the social hierarchy between students feels like nothing more than a joke after all he had endured. But since that behavior also appears on adults, he accepts the advice and tells Ginji that he'll be more careful, then leaves his classroom to buy a drink. Shinichiro stands in front of the vending machine thinking that he won't let his life get ruined again by cowering before others, when suddenly someone calls him. The guy is apparently the school bully, and Shinichiro remembers he was called Hino. In the past, Shinichiro used to be one of the weak students Hino picked on, but now, he feels no fear at all standing in front of him. Trying to look intimidating, Hino tells him that he has no money for lunch and would like some of his. Shinichiro remains calm, saying that he has no reason to give him money, making Hino almost yell in surprise. Hino keeps trying to act tough, but Shinichiro shuts him down, saying he has no time to play gangster with him. He presses further, telling him that his looks are just decoration and nothing more. Hino grabs him by the shirt, yelling that he'll beat him up if he continues messing with him. The way he spoke made Shinichiro recall the threats from his old bosses, and compared to them, Hino was nothing. Even in that position, Shinichiro remains firm, telling him to hit him if he wishes to get expelled. Hino grows tired of his attitude and snatches the wallet from his hand. With a smug expression, Hino starts leaving while holding the wallet, telling his victim to take that as a lesson. Hino starts checking its contents and mocks him for only having 3,000 yen. But Shinichiro calls him, and in a flash, he grabs Hino and slams him against the wall, asking why he's mocking him for being broke and then stealing his money. Shinichiro gets fed up with this child's play and yells at him, demanding if he has any idea how much work someone has to endure to earn those 3,000 yen. Typing your life away, enduring abuse from bosses, and bowing to foolish clients is just a glimpse of what it takes to get it, and an idiot like Hino has no right to put his hands on it. With a menacing gaze, Shinichiro tells Hino that if he dares to take his mother's money, he will end his life for real. Shinichiro releases him and asks if he understood. Hino confirms while trembling, and Shinichiro takes back his wallet and walks away under the impressed gaze of his classmates. He returns to his classroom, and upon sitting, he can't believe what he just did. The day finally ends, and Shinichiro remembers that he has never been so angry before. However, he feels he did the right thing. After all, it's unacceptable that someone tried to steal his mom's money, but he doesn't dwell on it anymore. And for now, he wants to focus on his library work with Haruka. He enters the library and sees her standing by the window, gazing at the scenery. Shinichiro feels blessed to be spending time with a girl like her. Upon noticing him, Haruka greets him with a bright smile, and they begin organizing the activities for the day. They start checking the records, and Haruka grows worried upon seeing so many overdue books. Shinichiro suggests putting the names of the students who are always late in the school announcement, startling Haruka since she doesn't want to upset anyone. Shinichiro adds that first they will issue a warning, and if the books aren't returned in a week, then they'll proceed with the announcement. That was how he usually worked at his old office. If deliveries were delayed even after reminder emails, he would also copy their bosses and co-workers, making even the laziest employees rush out of shame. Shinichiro keeps explaining his strategy, saying he can handle anyone who tries to cause trouble, and immediately realizes his working attitude is slipping out. He worries again, thinking Haruka might be displeased with his plan, but reality is far from it. Haruka is deeply impressed by his way of talking and thinking, as if he were a completely different person. Yet she still knows that he's the same Shinichiro. She had always noticed his behavior when dealing with students borrowing books and how he used to organize the library to make things easier for readers. Shinichiro is taken aback upon realizing that Haruka had always paid attention to him. She is impressed by how much he has changed just from the way he speaks and decides to give his idea a try. She's already outgoing, but she doesn't want to keep being treated like a child by her parents, making Shinichiro look at her with a faint smile. But Haruka doesn't like the fact that he seems to be looking at her as if he were a proud father watching his child. Shinichiro promises he isn't, putting on a facade he learned as an adult. He was simply happy to have normal conversations with Haruka. They finally finish their duties, and Shinichiro stays behind for a while, closing up the library and thinking that the two of them really make a good team. He starts leaving when he hears shouts coming from a different corridor in the school. Upon approaching, he sees Haruka being harassed by 3 girls. He immediately recognizes them. It's the group of Hanayama, 3 girls obsessed with boys and money who hate anyone prettier than them. One of them tells Haruka she should stop flirting with men, cut her hair, and stop using makeup. Haruka casually reveals that she doesn't use makeup, sparking fury from the other girl whose face is covered in it. But before she can do anything, Shinichiro appears and tells her to stop at once. Haruka smiles upon seeing him, but the girl immediately tells him to get lost. He instantly remembers that kind of woman even in his old office, those who use their charm with coworkers while bullying women more attractive than them. Shinichiro remains firm, asking her again to stop, and the girl mocks him, asking what a loser like him could possibly do. He asks her if the North Station rings a bell, especially the hotel area. This phrase makes the girl freeze in fear, and she demands to know how he knows about it. He casually says that he came across her business, which is a lie, since it actually got exposed in their last year at school, leading to her expulsion. Shinichiro calmly adds that he doesn't care about it, but if she keeps bothering Haruka, her secret might get out. The girl rushes away with her group, telling them to forget about those two, while Shinichiro displays a proud smile. Haruka is deeply grateful and asks how she can repay him. However, Shinichiro tells her not to worry. He only appeared because he heard voices in the school. He asks if someone is going to pick her up, but Haruka reveals that she told her parents she wanted to walk home like the rest of her classmates. Naturally, he offers to walk her home. Inwardly, he is nervous, but his old job had forged him a tough exterior. Shinichiro wanted to be there for her after the incident. She still looked shaken, and it wouldn't be right to let her walk alone at night. Haruka is overjoyed by the offer and says she'd love him to walk her home. For a moment, Shinichiro thought he would be labeled as a creep, but upon seeing her smile, all his worries disappeared. They start walking towards Haruka's home, chatting about light novels as if they were old friends. In his previous life, Shinichiro walked with women, but only when it was related to his job. However, this time, he can enjoy Haruka's smile since she probably doesn't have anyone else to share conversations about light novels with. Haruka realizes that she's been talking too much and apologizes, but Shinichiro is glad that she's feeling better. Haruka thanks him again for his help and reveals that she had been harassed like that multiple times, always by other girls since elementary school. However, she doesn't understand why those girls hate her. Shinichiro understands that she truly doesn't know. She probably has never experienced jealousy. He calmly tells her that it would be better for her to know the reasons, and Haruka begs him to explain. Shinichiro casually mentions that she is very kind and beautiful, making Haruka blush instantly. She tries to deny all of that, but Shinichiro continues his compliments, saying that she's the only one unaware of it. He tells her that the harassment is not her fault and asks her to repeat that 10 times to herself. And due to her innocence, Haruka starts repeating that it isn't her fault while Shinichiro thinks that this will help her in the future. Due to his experience, he has seen that many bullied people end up blaming themselves for the abuse. and that was probably the cause for Haruka to take her own life in the original timeline. Haruka repeats the phrase 10 times, and Shinichiro tells her that every time another girl bullies her, she has to remember that it is never her fault. Haruka can't take her eyes away from him, and he asks her what's on her mind. She mentions that she's surprised he's so serious about the topic, making Shinichiro reaffirm that he hates seeing her going through hardships. Her voice starts trembling, but she manages to ask him if he was serious when he said all those things about her looks. Shinichiro is unaware of the situation he's in, and with a smile says that when he first met her, he couldn't believe such a beautiful girl existed, making her even more nervous and red-faced. After a while, they arrive at Haruka's house, and Shinichiro is surprised to see that she lives in such a huge place. Haruka bows and thanks him again for all his help. He tries to be modest, but Haruka is beyond grateful. She would be very sad if it weren't for him. Shinichiro tells her that if she needs someone to talk to, he would be more than happy to listen. At that moment, he realizes he's been acting as his previous self and says farewell with a smile. Walking home, Shinichiro is glad that his corporate years helped him talk with Haruka. His mission now is to change her future by teaching her how to face the harsh reality of the world. After a while, he returns home and finds Kanako, his younger sister, who asks him why he is looking so strangely at her. Shinichiro remembers that they used to talk less and less over the years, and after their mom passed away, they never exchanged another word. Shinichiro tries to change the topic, asking Kanako if she's planning to have instant ramen for dinner, which she confirms since their mom will get home late. Without a second thought, he tells her that he will cook something for her, surprising Kanako. Shinichiro opens the fridge and immediately knows what to make. He starts cooking like a professional while Kanako can't believe her brother is so skilled in the kitchen. Shinichiro presents her with omurice, while Kanako is still unsure if she's dreaming. Shinichiro tells her to eat while it's hot and she takes a bite. Kanako's expression fills with joy upon tasting the food, but upon noticing her brother watching her, she starts pretending as if the food was just okay. While she's eating, Shinichiro starts apologizing for never acting as her older brother. But from that day on, he'll try to make up for it by cooking in their mom's stead. And she can even ask him for her favorite meals, making Kanako wonder if she's really talking to her brother. Meanwhile, in Haruka's room, she's looking at the ceiling, thinking about Shinichiro. She always considered him a good and quiet guy. But that day, she noticed a special brightness in him, as if he was a completely different person. She remembers how he casually told her how beautiful he thinks she is, and Haruka can't help but blush again. She looks outside her window, thinking about how sad she used to get at home after being bullied. But today was different, all thanks to Shinichiro, who had the right words to lift her spirits and make her realize that it wasn't her fault. 2 weeks have passed since Shinichiro time-traveled, and he's already accustomed to his daily life. However, the fear of waking up in his old world was a lingering dread every time he went to sleep. One day at school, Haruka was thanking Shinichiro for taking care of the overdue students, since he announced to the school all the missing books and the students rushed to return them. Thanks to walking Haruka home, now Shinichiro had more chances to talk to her. Suddenly, they heard some girls talking about the school festival, reminding them both that the event was around the corner and the theme of their classroom still hadn't been decided. Shinichiro wasn't aware that Haruka was into that kind of activity and feels glad to learn a new side of her. Back in class, Shinichiro was reading a book until a girl started yelling in desperation for not having notes about the lecture. She is Mai Fudeashi, an athlete from track and field who got into an incident during their last period. She was dozing off during the lesson, but the teacher noticed, waking her up immediately. Mai tried to pretend she was paying attention and even writing amazing notes, but the teacher didn't buy it and asked for her notebook after school, warning it better be perfect or she'd get detention. Mai tried asking her friends for help, but nobody had decent notes. Shinichiro thought for a moment that it would be better for her to face the consequences, but his merciful side won, and he called out to her. He wasn't sure if his notes were enough, but still offered them. Upon reading through them, Mai couldn't believe he copied the entire class perfectly. Mai was overjoyed by his help, but Shinichiro reminded her that she shouldn't nap in class, and she promised it would be the last time. Shinichiro was doing his best in his academics to succeed in this timeline, and he was using the skills he learned during his agonizing job to achieve that. He still didn't know how to feel about receiving praise, but being recognized didn't feel half bad. One day, Genji mentioned that he was surprised to see his best friend climbing the social ladder. Shinichiro dismissed it, saying that things normally didn't change, but Genji countered that he hadn't been acting normal these last days. He was talking directly with people, helping everyone with ease, and even added that he heard rumors about Shinichiro beating up Hino and making him apologize. Genji wanted to make sure he hadn't actually gone to another world and leveled up defeating bosses. Shinichiro casually mentioned that he had to fight day after day without sleep, even considering taking his own life to be free. obviously referring to his old life. Genji asked if he hadn't noticed all the gazes he was getting, but Shinichiro didn't look worried since the bullies had stopped bothering him. Genji reaffirmed that everyone had noticed the nerdy kid gaining a confident new personality, and now seemed worthy of respect. Shinichiro thought that all he was doing was avoiding shady companies and returning a few favors, without realizing that he was expanding his social circle. Back at his house, he was proud of the sandwiches he had just made for breakfast until someone stepped in. Immediately, Shinichiro offered his little sister one of them, making her stomach growl. Kanako took a bite, but no words came out of her mouth, making Shinichiro worry about the amount of pepper he used. But that wasn't the problem. Kanako confronted him, asking why he had been acting so weird lately. At some point, he started cooking delicious meals in Mom's stead, cleaning the house, taking care of his appearance, and even studying every day. For a moment, Kanako thought her older brother had been replaced by a cleaning robot without anyone noticing. Shinichiro just wanted to get free from his regrets, but he knew telling her that he came back in time wasn't an option, so he decided to make a normal excuse. He mentioned that he was interested in someone, sparking Kanako's curiosity. He continued, saying that the girl had always been an inspiration to him, but at his current level he wasn't good enough for her, and that's why he wanted to improve himself, his looks, and his grades. Kanako finally smiled at her brother, commending him for his sudden change. She started praising him in an unusual way, saying that he was no longer the loser, introvert, and good-for-nothing older brother she had. Kanako was bursting with curiosity, asking who the lucky girl was, and Shinichiro had no problem showing her a picture. And for 20 minutes, Shinichiro kept talking with his sister about Haruka, to the point that Kanako didn't want to hear anything anymore. Suddenly, Kanako grew worried. She was happy her brother had changed, but maybe trying to get a girl like Haruka to be his girlfriend was too much of a challenge. But Shinichiro countered, saying he never mentioned anything about getting a girlfriend. That took Kanako by surprise since it sounded exactly like Shinichiro was trying to achieve that. But he said she was just his inspiration, someone he admired from afar. He wanted to get closer, but just as her friend. Shinichiro casually said that sometimes he got nervous upon seeing her smile, and upon looking at Kanako, he couldn't help but ask why she was making that face. Kanako yelled with all her might, calling her brother an idiot. She had been excited to witness the sudden awakening of her brother as if he were a manga hero, but he was still the same older brother she knew. She wouldn't allow it. She knew there were still many things she could fix in him. Kanako started acting as the heroine of Shinichiro's life, offering her help to get closer to Haruka since he still didn't know how to get along with girls, despite his sudden power-up. But worries started appearing again. Kanako was unsure if such a perfect girl was actually single, but Shinichiro told her not to worry, since he had seen how innocent Haruka really was. He told her that she was unaware of all the stares she got, and even if someone tried to go further, other people blocked him to maintain the status quo. For Kanako, those were just excuses from a bunch of losers who never dared to act. But in case those rumors were true, Kanako asked her brother if they would attempt to block him even if he only wanted to be friends with her, to which Shinichiro confirmed. However, he wouldn't let anyone get in his way of getting closer to Haruka. He would just push them aside, making his sister proud. Kanako burst out with another smile, respecting her brother for taking a stance for someone he cared about and promising to do her best to help him. The following day, Shinichiro is looking at his exam results, thinking that it's pretty good he got 10th place considering he just returned 3 weeks ago. Genji can't hide his surprise. He doesn't recognize his friend anymore. He never expected to see Shinichiro in the top 10 for the midterms, and not seeing him even surprised makes Genji fill with fury. Suddenly, Haruka calls him, commending him for his results. Shinichiro casually mentions that he tried harder, but Haruka continues with her praises, saying that she is not even in the top half, while Genji still doesn't understand how those two got so close. At that moment, Haruka seizes the chance to ask Shinichiro for a favor. She wants him to save her from light novel prohibition, taking Shinichiro aback. In one of the classrooms, Haruka explains that she's been too invested in light novels, to the point of lowering her grades significantly. Just to confirm, Shinichiro asks about the number, and is surprised to hear that Haruka has read more than 40 in a month. Haruka continues, saying that her dad got angry and won't allow her to read more novels if she doesn't improve her grades. Shinichiro is still shocked to see someone so hardworking as her neglecting her studies, but Haruka clarifies that she indeed focuses, but when picking up a novel, she would spend hours reading it without noticing the time passing. She is aware that most people think she's good at everything, but she's just an ordinary girl. Shinichiro realizes that he's also been building a perfect image of her, but even seeing her worrying about regular things charms him. Haruka bows, asking him to please tutor her, but Shinichiro says it is not necessary to be that polite and that he'll be more than happy to help. However, Shinichiro asks why she's asking him for tutoring, since there are plenty of people smarter than him. But Haruka says that it would be problematic to ask someone she barely knows. She casually adds that she'd prefer to study with the closest boy to her, someone she can feel safe with. Shinichiro receives the direct hit, blushing instantly, and to calm down he asks Haruka if they should start right away. She agrees with a huge smile, calling him teacher and asking him to take care of her. Receiving that answer is more than a school student can handle, and Shinichiro ends up exhausted in seconds, with Haruka unaware of the bomb she just dropped. And just like that, an hour passed. The class went smoothly thanks to Haruka's diligent attitude. Haruka is glad to see that Shinichiro's teaching skills are amazing and wonders if he had some teaching experience, which he confirms. He recalls his first year in his old company, when his superiors told him to ask if something was unclear about his responsibilities. However, reality was different. Nobody wanted to solve his questions, and if he made a mistake, they would yell at him because he never asked. It got to a point where he stopped asking and naturally developed 3 principles when he had to train others, which are the same he is applying with Haruka. First, he would show the student the completed task and what everything means. Second, show the process to reach a completed task, making sure that each step is being followed by the student. And finally, praise the student to raise confidence and make it easier to ask remaining questions, which is exactly where Shinichiro is at with Haruka, praising her for solving the problem. Haruka can't stop smiling and admiring Shinichiro's teaching skills. After a while, they decide to take a short break, and Haruka asks him if he has decided what he wants to do after school, which Shinichiro replies quickly, saying that he wants to go to college in order to find a good company. Haruka mentions that her father is already preparing a position for her in his company after she graduates college, but she considers that cheating, surprising Shinichiro with her honesty. She nervously adds that she's still unsure but has already checked job descriptions about workplaces that are like home or that welcome all applicants, sparking Shinichiro's old memories. Haruka continues, saying that those descriptions sound nice and thinks that doing her best will be more than enough in those places. Upon finishing, Shinichiro yells with all his might, telling her to stop. He warns Haruka that she can't get fooled by that kind of description since those are tickets to hell, which Haruka doesn't understand. Shinichiro's experiences were made for this moment. He explains that companies that welcome any applicant have terrible job conditions. The companies that claim to be like family are actually controlled by the family of the CEO. And finally, the companies where hard work is rewarded are just another way to say that they have insane quotas. He advises Haruka to avoid those in order to never encounter a shady company. Shinichiro was about to expose himself, but says that his cousin used to work almost all day, and his extra hours were simply erased so he could never get compensation, which really scares Haruka. She asks him how he knows so many details about that company, and Shinichiro reminds her that his cousin told him everything about the horrible place where he worked until he was 30. Shinichiro gets serious, mentioning the verbal abuse his cousin suffered, all the work he had to do, and constantly receiving blame from the bosses, but no credit for a good job. Haruka listens attentively, not believing that workers could collapse from exhaustion and be completely ignored by those in charge. She asks him if he is not mixing up wartime torture stories, but Shinichiro says that is the reality of current Japan. He finishes by saying that's why he's doing his best in his studies to find a good job, which also ends up motivating Haruka. He is aware that the stories from his old life scared Haruka, but they should be more than enough to take her away from her path of self-destruction. Haruka commends Shinichiro for changing so dramatically just by hearing those stories, but he mentions that he's nothing special after all. He got a second chance after learning those lessons the hard way. In his first life, he didn't care that much about his future, thinking that everything would work out somehow, and he had to pay 12 years in a horrible company. He even had hopes that fate would make him and Haruka end up together, but he never saw her again. He had to live through hell and die once in order to understand reality, so he has nothing special. But suddenly, Haruka breaks the flow of bad thoughts, saying that he's indeed great. She is aware that everyone knows they should work on becoming the best version of ourselves, but actually doing it requires a lot of willpower. With a bright and honest smile, Haruka mentions that she respects Shinichiro for making the decision to act, something that she considers very attractive. Shinichiro can't help but blush, trying to hold his feelings from bursting out. One day, during a break in their study sessions, Shinichiro couldn't help but notice how excited Haruka was about the upcoming school festival. She explained that she couldn't experience them when she was a child, and so every time the school is in a festival mood, she feels overjoyed. Haruka considers that students gathering together to make the event enjoyable is too wonderful, but despite her emotions shining, Shinichiro always thought the festivals were a bother he had to endure. Enjoying those events is something he couldn't do in his previous life. So this time, he decides to play along with Haruka, though she's still unsure of what event her class is going to produce. The next day, the ideas for the school festival are displayed on the board, though it seems nobody is able to reach an agreement about what to choose. Mitsuki is leading the meeting, but even she is getting annoyed seeing people fight over their ideas. Shinichiro is tired of it. They've been there for over an hour and nothing has been settled yet. Upon gazing at the meeting, he realized it was all noise. On one side, there are people that only argue but don't propose anything, and on the other, some that only want to take the easiest option. Mitsuki is in the middle, but she's too obsessed with cooperation to the point of never making a decision. It all resembles his meetings in his previous life, people wanting to make their ideas heard but without the will to have a discussion. He knows that under this situation, the other students prefer to stay silent, waiting for the arbitrator to solve the problem. But Mitsuki seems to lack that ability. This happened exactly the same in his previous life, the class argued, until time ran out and ended up making an exhibition no one cared about. Suddenly, Shinichiro looked at Haruka. She appeared nervous and sad. All her happiness and excitement for the festival she showed before was vanishing. He knows that if this continues, the end result will be the opposite of what Haruka wanted. He knows there's a way to make something meaningful, but it would require a lot of preparation and execution. He has already seen a bad festival, so it wouldn't be wrong to make something nice for once, especially because Shinichiro doesn't want to see Haruka sad at the end of the festival. Back at his house, Kanako is watching in hunger as her older brother cooks some takoyaki and she asks why he's making that, to which Shinichiro explains that he's doing it in order to keep Haruka from being sad, which Kanako doesn't fully understand. She asks him if Haruka has an obsession with baking powder or something, but Shinichiro replies that it has nothing to do with that. Kanako keeps yelling at him for not explaining properly until Shinichiro receives a call. In an instant, he becomes a professional businessman, negotiating with the person on the other end of the call while Kanako looks at him dumbfounded, not knowing if she's truly seeing her brother. Upon hanging up, Kanako can't hold her curiosity and asks him how he managed to transform into a professional negotiator. Shinichiro notices his businessman side slipped again, but he pretends, saying that he just copied the style that the manufacturers use. Kanako decides to ignore it since her brother's oddities are becoming part of his usual self. She decides to ask again about his plans to make Haruka happy, but Shinichiro is taking this issue seriously and Kanako notices, affirming that she's become a huge fan of the new side of her older brother. Shinichiro explains his plan, but Kanako can't hide her laughter, despite her brother reminding her that he's serious about it. Kanako apologizes, adding that it is very special that someone made him change this much since the old version of her brother never would have thought about this kind of plan. She encourages him, asking him to give it his best since he might never find someone else that impacts him that much. Shinichiro accepts her words. He thinks that meeting Haruka is nothing less than a miracle, something that makes fate deserving of an honest thanks. However, he always considered Haruka as an inspiration, as an idol, but for some reason, those words are starting to feel off. Kanako notices her brother spacing out and asks if everything is all right. He confirms and finishes the takoyaki before it burns. With that, he's sure that he'll put his plan in motion the next day. The next day arrives and the scene repeats itself. Nothing but arguments fill the mood of the classroom. Shinichiro doesn't understand how the people fighting don't realize that they are just wasting time and killing the will of the others to participate. He decides that he's seen enough and now it's the perfect moment to step in, but for some reason his legs feel heavy. His body starts shaking. Even coming back from death didn't get rid of that sensation. The feeling of not wanting to leave his seat, his safe place, where he didn't need to give his opinion or take action. But this time, he won't let that feeling take control of his life. He's been a coward for far too long already. He stands up, surprising Mitsuki and the rest of his classmates. From all the people, nobody was expecting him to intervene. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.